By now, I think most of us know about the allegations against Neil Gaiman, an enormously successful author who was for a long time my favourite author, whose novels, comics, and short stories have been adapted into beloved films and TV shows. Neil Gaiman's works are everywhere, and they are impressive. But since those allegations came to light, a lot of us just don't want to engage with the works of Neil Gaiman anymore. And those allegations are not what this video is about. I've already made 2 other videos about them. But something that I talk about a lot, something that I firmly believe in, is that the world of art is massive and diverse. When one author lets you down, no matter how much you love that author and their works, the silver lining is that you can see this as an opportunity to go out there and discover so many great authors. Authors who maybe inspired the person who let you down, or maybe were inspired by them, or maybe they work in a similar genre or tackle similar themes. Whatever the case, there is a wide world out there. And with that in mind, if you are done with the works of Neil Gaiman but still enjoy the kinds of stories that he has told, here are some amazing authors for you to check out. And because Neil Gaiman's works stretch across prose and comics, I'm going to talk about prose and comics. These authors are all spectacular. Some of them have worked closely with Neil Gaiman, and I recommend all of them wholeheartedly. So let's start with the most obvious choice. The late, great Sir Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett is arguably one of the most beloved authors to ever walk this earth, and he created an entire world of his own. But he also worked with Neil Gaiman on the novel Good Omens, which was adapted into a really great TV show. Famously, Neil Gaiman came up with the idea for Good Omens and he didn't know how the book would end, so he called up Terry Pratchett and Terry said, well, you've got 2 choices. I know how the book ends. So you either sell it to me and I'll write it, or we work on it together, which is what happened. But we also have Terry Pratchett's Discworld. Now, while I am a fan of Good Omens, I've been a fan of Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett individually for so long. And Good Omens is not my favourite thing that either of them did. When it comes to Terry Pratchett, for me, like with so many people, it's the Discworld. Terry Pratchett's Discworld spans over 30 novels, and across those novels we follow a variety of different protagonists who all live on a flat planet that flies through the cosmos on the back of a turtle. And the entire Discworld is an exercise in satire. Every single novel satirizes some social or political element of our world. Terry Pratchett, alongside Douglas Adams, was one of the great satirists of fiction. And what's so unique about him is that science fiction is famous as a vehicle for satire, but fantasy isn't. Outside Terry Pratchett's Discworld, there isn't a lot of satirical fantasy. That is usually reserved for sci-fi. But Terry Pratchett did so many wonders by creating a diverse cast of characters in a very fleshed out and 3-dimensional world, and yet used every single novel as a vehicle for political satire. His books are cynical in the way that satire often is. They punch up at the powerful people who do us wrong, but they're also full of love and hope and 10 laughs per page. It's very difficult to read a Discworld novel in public because you will laugh out loud the entire time. So if you don't care about Neil Gaiman anymore, or you won't let yourself care anymore, but you've never read the Discworld, there are more than 30 novels here for you to enjoy. We use the word genius way too much these days, but Terry Pratchett was a true genius. Now, while many of Neil Gaiman's most famous works are novels, he actually began as a comic book writer. Most famously, he created the Sandman universe for Vertigo Comics. The Sandman is spectacular, but it was part of something called the British Invasion, which is also a term that's used in music as well. In the world of comic books, the British Invasion happened through the 80s and 90s when American comic book publishers like DC and Marvel looked across the pond and sought out strange and exciting new talent from the UK. These comic book writers included Neil Gaiman, along with my personal favourite comic book writer, Grant Morrison, and the the visionary writer Alan Moore. And if you're a fan of Neil Gaiman's comics, but you've never read Alan Moore, my God, what are you doing? I'm sorry. I don't want to be rude, but you need to read Alan Moore. He wrote Watchmen, he wrote V for Vendetta, he wrote From Hell, he wrote The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and he wrote my personal favourite of everything he's ever done, Swamp Thing. Much like how Neil Gaiman did not create the Sandman, Alan Moore didn't originally create Swamp Thing, but it's his run on Swamp Thing for Vertigo Comics, which is exactly where Sandman was published, that became such a global phenomenon. Like the Sandman, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is a wonderfully unique work of dark yet wonderfully imaginative, monstrous, horror-inspired fantastical fiction. The incredible mind of Alan Moore is on display at the very beginning of this series because, you see, in the original run of Swamp Thing, it was about a man who turns into a monster, but Alan Moore turned the idea on its head. Instead of a man who becomes a monster, his Swamp Thing is a monster that thinks it's a man. It's a fascinating twist that really resonates with someone who loves Frankenstein as much as I do, and it allowed for a wonderfully moralistic, thematic exploration of monsters in culture. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is a miracle of a comic book. This entire run is available in bookshops everywhere, and it is really, really phenomenal stuff. But if you don't fancy Swamp Thing, like I said, read Watchmen, read V for Vendetta. These are iconic stories. You've probably seen the films, and I promise the books are better, especially Watchmen, because Zack Snyder sucks. What is it with that guy taking genuinely excellent properties and twisting them with his own immoral politics? Alan Moore is a communist, an anarcho-communist, and Zack Snyder gets his ridiculously fascist tinted hooks into his books and ruins them? How does he have the nerve? Anyway, this is about Neil Gaiman and the people you should read instead, and that includes Alan Moore. Another magical author that you need to read if you love the works of Neil Gaiman is Suzanna Clarke. Now, Suzanna Clarke actually knows Neil Gaiman. As far as I understand, when she wrote her novel Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, she sent it to someone who then sent it on to Neil Gaiman, who then sent it on to an editor because he was so impressed with it. So Neil Gaiman, as I understand it, did have a hand in the publication of this book. Neil Gaiman often reads and promotes books that are kind of similar to his because he has a style and a type. And if you like his style, you're going to love Suzanna Clarke. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell was her debut novel. It is a 1,000-page historical fantasy epic about two magicians. It is one of the most uniquely joyous and inventive things I have ever read. I have a wonderful memory of reading this book during my downtime while I was teaching at a university in Tokyo. God, like 7 years ago now? It took me 2 weeks to get through it piece by piece, and I loved the adventure that I went on. Every single time I picked this book up, I was transported to an entirely different world in an alternate history of Napoleonic Britain. What a fascinating and unique thing this is. And then we have Piranesi, a book that I often talk about on this channel. One, because I love it. Two, because it's very versatile when it comes to recommending it. So many different kinds of readers love this book. And three, because it's a guaranteed hit. It is so rare that you meet someone who doesn't love Piranesi. This book won the Women's Prize. It is a short 250-page work of surreal-ish, urban-ish fantasy. One of the most lovely things about it is the protagonist, who is such a himbo. He's the most charming and lovely creature. I don't want to belabor it because I talk about Piranesi a lot on this channel. I do have a dedicated review from, well, quite a few years ago now. And both of these books are full of so much joy, creativity, and adventure. Three things that Neil Gaiman has been known for like 30 years. But something I think Suzanna Clarke does so much better than Neil Gaiman is create fun protagonists. His protagonists, even back when I loved his works, I often found that they were quite wooden and two-dimensional people. Her protagonists are full of a lot more colour and life than his ever were. And for that, she's kind of a step up from Neil Gaiman. Either way, She is an incredible author in her own right that everybody needs to check out. Oh, hey, are you enjoying this video right now? You having a good time? Are you learning things? Do you appreciate it? Amazing, that's great to know. In that case, you can support me on Patreon. Patreon is what pays the bills, and I have a lot of different tiers that offer a lot of different rewards. My Patreon community is an amazingly diverse selection of bookworms. They're amazing people, and if you want to be part of that community, if you want to join a private Discord, if you want to support the work that I do on this channel, $1 a month for you can change everything for me. So if you're enjoying this video, go to patreon.com/WillowTalksBooks. I would hugely appreciate your support. Thank you. One thing that Neil Gaiman has been known for a long time now is his approach to mythology, of taking classic mythologies, especially Norse mythology, and adapting them and playing around with them, placing those gods in a modern setting and wondering how they would live and what they would do. Neil Gaiman's approach to mythology has been fascinating, and over the last 10 plus years we've had so many other great authors who have come along and adapted and rewritten and reignited a love for Greek and Norse myths especially. And my favourite of those authors is probably Natalie Haynes, author of Thousand Ships, Pandora's Jar, and Stone Blind, my personal favourite of her books. Now, as I said, a lot of authors have been doing this. I'm also a huge fan of Jennifer Saint and Madeline Miller, but Natalie Haynes is the most literary. A lot of these authors are women who are doing feminist twists on mythology, and Natalie Haynes takes all of that to a deeper level, examining the weaknesses of these great male heroes of Greek mythology and the strengths of the female monsters like Medusa. Her prose is experimental and unique. If you read Thousand Ships, the way that that entire novel is laid out is really unique and unlike anything you've ever read. Stone Blind is something that I personally love and find similar to the works of Neil Gaiman because it focuses on a monster. And Neil Gaiman has often presented himself as a feminist author, and a feminist in general. But Natalie Haynes is doing feminism in Greek mythology better than anybody else. And I really urge you to check out Stone Blind in particular. The way that she depicts Perseus, Medusa, and Athena in this book is wholly unique and fascinating and fun. It is literary and clever and moving, and I love it all so, so much. Natalie Haynes is incredible. And when it comes to digging up mythology and making it feel so vital and vibrant in today's literary scene, nobody does it like Natalie Haynes. One of the great fantasy authors working today is N.K. Jemisin. Her Broken Earth trilogy, which began with the 5th season, won so many awards, and it shook up the world of fantasy fiction, but when it comes to something that feels kind of Neil Gaiman-esque, you need to read her urban fantasy duology that begins with this, The City We Became. The City We Became is set in modern-day New York, and it's built on the idea that after a while, every city develops its own soul. But some cities are so large and so diverse and have so much of a history that they develop multiple souls. In the case of New York, there's one soul for every borough. Already, this kind of sounds like the type of thing that Neil Gaiman would come up with, but he didn't. N.K. Jemisin did, and she is amazing. But something else that this book has in common with the works of Neil Gaiman is that it's pretty Lovecraftian. As it goes on and we learn more about the enemies and threats and monsters, they reveal themselves to be pretty Lovecraftian in their origins and their behaviors. Neil Gaiman also adores Lovecraft and imbued so much of his fiction with Lovecraftian themes and elements. A creative work of urban fantasy set in New York with Lovecraftian elements, if you just describe that to a Neil Gaiman fan, they go, oh wow, yeah, that's Neil Gaiman. But it's not, it's N.K. Jemisin. And because N.K. Jemisin is a black American woman, not a white British man, she imbues her fiction with so much more of her experiences and so much more diversity, making The City We Became a far more colourful and diverse thing than Neil Gaiman ever would have written. So many fantasy fans love her Broken Earth trilogy, and I'm thrilled about that, but not enough people have read The City We Became, and I love it to pieces. Just before I get to my final kind of wildcard recommendation, here are 3 honourable mentions that I just want to throw in without much context. First, V.E. Schwab. I am very confident that a lot of people clicked on this video expecting me to mention V.E. Schwab, so I am. The reason I'm not giving her a lot of time is because the only book of hers that I've really adored is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So I can't really go through all of her books and recommend them wholeheartedly, but I am aware that she really does scratch that Neil Gaiman itch. So check out The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I did really enjoy that book. And she does have a new novel coming out this year that sounds fantastic. Another comic book writer who has written something that feels very Neil Gaiman-esque is Kieran Gillen. Kieran Gillen is a British comic book writer who has worked on Iron Man. He used to be a video games journalist, and he wrote a fantastic original comic book series for Image called The Wicked and the Divine. The Wicked and the Divine, often shortened to WickDiv, is a really fun kind of satire of celebrity culture and how we worship celebrities like gods. What if these celebrities really were gods, and they were caught in a kind of cycle of death and reanimation? At least, it's been a long time since I've read it. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Check it out and let me know if I remember it right. And my last honourable mention is Diana Wynne Jones, an author who does not get enough attention. I mean, she's dead now and she's still not getting enough attention. She wrote Howl's Moving Castle. Everyone knows the Ghibli film. Too few people know the novel. Neil Gaiman has written almost as many children's books as he has adult fiction. And Diana Wynne Jones has written so many incredible and fantastical children's books that are better than the children's books that Neil Gaiman has written, and definitely better than Harry Potter. You've got Howl's Moving Castle and its sequel, and you've also got a selection of books known as the Chrestomanci series, which began with the novel Charmed Life. Now, Charmed Life came out in the late 70s, and if you read it now, you'll think, okay, feels pretty similar to Harry Potter. And as you keep digging, it's interesting how many children's books from the 60s, 70s, and 80s Harry Potter reminds you of. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting, J.K. Rowling? The Chrestomanci series is delightful, in part because it follows a young protagonist who's pretty unlikable, especially at the beginning. We often use phrases like boys will be boys and kids will be kids, but Chrestomanci is fascinating in the way that it explores that kind of philosophy. Diana Wynne Jones didn't write good guys and bad guys, she wrote complex characters for children to read about, and she should be celebrated. More than J.K. Rowling and more than Neil Gaiman. She wrote Howl's Moving Castle. And my final recommendation is T. Kingfisher, an author who is perhaps best known for her horror fiction. But Neil Gaiman's books, although almost always fantastical in their nature, are often very much tinged with horror. There are a few moments in The Ocean at the End of the Lane that had me shaking as I read them. And like Neil Gaiman, T. Kingfisher also explores the realm of fantasy, especially in this book, Nettle and Bone, my personal favourite T. Kingfisher novel. Now, T. Kingfisher's real name is Ursula Vernon, and she's written a lot of children's books under that name. But as T. Kingfisher, over the past few years, she has carved out a very vital place in the worlds of dark fantasy and horror fiction. The exact niche crossover area that Neil Gaiman has occupied for decades. Nettle and Bone is a short, dark, horror-inspired fantasy fairy tale adventure. It is very plainly inspired by the dark and upsetting fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen. It is a strange and twisted affair, but it is a fantasy adventure. And I really think that anyone who enjoys the darker elements of Neil Gaiman's fiction will love Nettle and Bone. This is a fantastic book. And once you've read it, then go and read some of her out-and-out horror novels, like The Twisted Ones and What Moves the Dead, which is a sequel to Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher. And it's so great. I love T. Kingfisher. She is one of my top 10 favourite authors of all time. She is so good at blending horror, fantasy, and fairy tales. She's awesome. There you go. Those are my recommendations for authors to check out if you just can't read Neil Gaiman anymore in the face of what has happened. There is such a wide world of wonderful fiction out there. If ever a favorite author of yours does something that means that you no longer feel comfortable supporting them, don't ever worry, because the world is big. I could do 10 of these videos. There are always more amazing authors out there that deserve your love and attention. And who knows, if you're a fan of Neil Gaiman and you read some of these authors, you might find that you love them more than you ever loved him. If not, keep digging, keep exploring. Go to bookshops, talk to booksellers, talk to librarians, watch my channel, listen to me. Fiction is a big, wide world. You don't have to settle for Neil Gaiman and J.K. Rowling. Go out and explore the world of fiction. It's so big and so beautiful. But also, join my Patreon and subscribe for books.